Hey there, listeners. This is Justin with a quick note before today's episode. We're going to be hosting a live seminar. It's going to be held by video on June 19th. That's Wednesday, June 19th. It'll be 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. It's going to be 90 minutes. This first seminar is hosted by Amgen. We're going to have 3 different team members with 3 different roles, with 3 different backgrounds, all veterans on the live panel. And just like on the show, I'm going to do 45 minutes of Q&A with the 3 of them. And then we're going to take 45 minutes and open it up to the audience to answer any and all questions that you have. If you have any interest whatsoever about Amgen, about the biotech and medical services industry, about functional roles that are universal across every industry, I'd really encourage you to join. I would love to see you there, add some faces to some names, and have your participation. I think you're going to learn a lot, and we're very, very excited to kick this off, and also very grateful for Amgen's support, because by sponsoring this panel, they're helping us expand our work over here at Beyond the Uniform, and all of this is 100% free for you to join. So costs nothing. You can register through our newsletter or look for a link on the site. Hope to see you there. Welcome back to Beyond the Uniform. I'm Justin Nassiri, and my goal is to help military veterans succeed in their civilian career. I do that by interviewing military veterans to learn about their civilian career, what they do, how they got there, and advice for other veterans seeking to do the same. Today's episode number 277 with Robert Woods III.
And what most employers don't know is that if they just do a little bit of paperwork, they can actually hire a veteran onto an on-the-job training program or an apprenticeship, and they can actually tap into the veteran's GI Bill. Yeah, so the veteran will get their salary in addition to the GI Bill allotment for that city.
Wow.
So, for example, if you're getting $4,000 a month from your salary, the VA is going to pay you in New York $4,000, an additional $4,000. So you end up almost doubling your salary that way.
Well, special thanks to Frank Vanburen from episode number 39 for making the introduction to Robert. Robert is the founder of Banneret, which has discovered a unique method to help veterans transition that is attractive to companies that want to do the right thing but are cash-strapped. In this interview, we talk about this novel approach, which may be appealing to many listeners. We also talk about entrepreneurship. As always, at beyondtheuniform.org, you'll find show notes with links to everything we discuss. You'll also find a link to be able to leave a positive review on iTunes and Apple Podcasts. Special thanks to Rob50124, who wrote on Apple Podcasts. Great podcast with excellent interviews with interesting guests that provide very meaningful insights on career advice for transitioning veterans. Highly recommend. Thank you, Rob, and all of those who have left positive reviews on Apple Podcasts. So with that, let's dive in to my conversation with Robert. Well, joining me today in New York, my guest is Robert Woods III. Robert, welcome to Beyond the Uniform.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate you for having me.
Yeah. Well, I want to give listeners a quick synopsis of your background. Robert is the founder of Banneret. It's an organization that's helping companies take advantage of incentives of hiring skilled military veterans. As a result of Banneret's work, businesses can save tens of thousands of dollars for every veteran hired, and veterans have an opportunity to add up to $45,000 to their first year's income without using the company's funds. He started out in the Air Force, where he served for over 5 years as a dental technician in the focused on oral surgery, and he holds a BBA from Howard University, a master's degree in investor relations from Fordham University, and is currently earning his MS in architecture from Columbia University. So maybe to start things off, Robert, especially for those who are on active duty, could you share a little bit more about what was your transition like out of the Air Force, and what was that first job search like?
Well, the transition out of the Air Force was relatively smooth, mainly because I was coming from Mississippi to New York, and I wanted to figure out how to get things going. So about 6 months out, I started calling people. And so at that time, they were, a lot of employers in New York told me, "Hey, you're too early." And so about 2 weeks before I left Mississippi, I actually got a phone call for an interview that was going to be the Monday after I landed in New York on Sunday. So
Wow.
essentially, I landed in New York on a Sunday, had an interview Monday, and I was hired for that job. But it was basically kind of that in between kind of job that you get when you're just trying to figure things out,
Yeah.
and just to pay the bills.
Mm.
And so I did that for about a year, and then I got another job as working in diversity and inclusion at a company called Guggenheim Partners.
Mm-hmm.
So I did that for about a year, and that's where I kind of cut my teeth in the HR field.
Mm.
And I got this bug where I was still interested in real estate, and so I actually ended up pursuing a master's in real estate development. So that's been kind of my 3-year transition so far. It's a little convoluted, but it's been fun.
Well, it's impressive to have it be that rapid. So it's great you were able to find that first opportunity. And I don't think you're alone in that. A year is probably the amount of time to reorient yourself and figure out this is what I like and don't like. And
Right.
I imagine in that year, your eyes are almost opened up to all these possibilities you didn't even know about when in the military. So
Exactly.
take us through the genesis of Banneret. Like, where did the idea come from? Was there like a specific point at which like the light bulb went off and you're like, this is what I want to do?
Yeah, well, I think I was always focused on trying to have an impact on like the communities that I'm a part of. So I knew that, hey, God put me in the military for a reason. Maybe this is meant to help someone else. And so when I transitioned, I noticed that, man, I already had a bachelor's degree, but I noticed that they're offering about minimum wage for me still, and I felt I was so salary, essentially. And I noticed that there were some government programs, sponsored by the VA that allowed, businesses to hire veterans through the Department of Veterans Affairs. And I kept wondering why businesses weren't using it more prevalently. And then, essentially Banneret was formed because I started pitching more and more businesses about this idea, and they had no idea that they could add $45,000 to veteran salaries using these hiring programs. And so, that was pretty much the genesis of it. I knew that I wasn't the only person with this issue, so I just set out to just get it going.
I love that. It's I think for listeners who aspire to entrepreneurship, it's very often that you see a pain point yourself and then you say, okay, is there more than one person on earth that has this pain point? Because you can maybe make a business like that, but you'd have to charge a lot of money for that one person. And so I love that story, Robert, where you're like, this is a pain point, and I've accumulated the knowledge to solve that over the last couple of years. So, and I'm actually not aware of this. So take me through, how does this work? Because that's a pretty compelling value proposition, and it's rare that it's compelling for the business and for the consumer. It's like a win-win solution. So how does that work? How are they able to save that money?
So it kind of works like a traditional insurance policy where a company pays to make sure your employee has a certain benefit, and if they want to use the benefit, they can cash in on it, essentially, right? So this benefit is attached to your GI Bill. So essentially, traditionally, veterans use their GI Bill to go to school, right? And so I think I listened to one of your interviews where a Marine Corps veteran ended up using her GI Bill in order to transition because she couldn't find a job.
Yep.
And I think that's like kind of the typical situation for us. And what most employers don't know is that if they just do a little bit of paperwork, they can actually hire a veteran onto an on-the-job training program or an apprenticeship, and they can actually tap into the veteran's GI Bill. And so the GI Bill will actually pay the veteran directly, but essentially providing that $40,000 benefit to that veteran over a year's time. That's basically the simplest way I can put it. But in New York,
so just to make sure I'm following, so it's almost like I get out of the military and the company is taking a risk, right? They're hiring me, they're training me, they're doing all of that. That takes them money and time, and so it's almost like the GI Bill is taking care of that. It's saying, hey, we recognize it's going to take you time to train this person. We'll foot the bill while they're being trained, and the veteran's taken care of because they're getting a salary while they're learning on the job. Is that right?
Yeah. So the veteran will get their salary in addition to the GI Bill allotment for that city.
Wow.
So, for example, if you're getting $4,000 a month from your salary, the VA is going to pay you in New York $4,000, an additional $4,000. So you end up almost doubling your salary that way.
Wow. What I love about that, it makes sense to me, right? Because I think so many of us learn, I learned a lot in school, but I think I've learned so much more on the job. And it's almost like the way that many career paths are going, where it's like what you learn in school may not be directly relevant to what you need to do to succeed in this career path. So I love that thought. It's like the GI fund is intended to be used to learn. This is just a different form of learning rather than books. You're learning on the job from other people in an industry with a specific skill set. And what I like about that too, it's like the biggest, the number of people I know who graduate and then don't have a job. But this is like you are getting the on-the-job education with the job to go after it. Is that fair?
Right.
Yep.
Exactly. Yeah. And I know a lot of officers actually don't end up using all of their GI Bill.
Yep.
So they end up getting an MBA, and that's only 2 years. So you end up still having about 1 year to go, and it kind of goes to waste. So. There's a few different types of veterans that can utilize the opportunity. Just kind of have to find a company, be lucky enough to find a company that knows how to utilize it. And that's kind of what we're doing.
So how does that work then? So if someone listening is excited about this prospect, did they contact someone like you? Like, did they contact Banneret to say, hey, I want to do this. I don't want to use this for school. I want to use this for training. Can you take us through what it looks like for them? So they go to your website. What happens from there?
Yeah, exactly. So the employer will initiate contact with me. I talk to them, give them the entire pitch or spiel about how to utilize the benefit in New York City. And then I take care of all the paperwork that they don't want to do. So essentially, you have your accountant that takes care of your taxes. I take care of your VA documentation. So I take care of all the paperwork and facilitate that process. And it's about a 30-day to 60-day process. So I do all the follow-up and everything. But after that, your company will be certified with the VA, and then you could go forward from there with your training program. And then
I'm assuming then they could do the company could do it again, and it's easier because it's in place then.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. They wouldn't even have to do anything.
When does someone typically engage with you then? Is it like I'm a veteran, I like this company, I've talked to them, I've interviewed with them, and then kind of once I have an offer, I'm like, by the way, or like when do they bring this up in the hiring process?
Well, the veteran would essentially ask they would ask their boss if they would like to utilize the program. Some people actually say no, they don't want to go through the hassle, but that's up to the business. And so that's kind of where we are with it. But I want it to get to the point where it's easier to make it happen.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Oh, that makes sense. And I was actually assuming this is like me applying to a job where I don't work. But is this more intended like I'm in an existing job and I want to get trained in a new role within that company?
Yeah, it could be. You could do it in both ways, but it's probably best if you're already at that company, because you've already established rapport and a relationship. And so that's why it would be easier for an existing employee.
That's great. Can you give a couple examples? Does you don't have to give obviously names, but like a representative story or two to let people understand what this looks like in practice?
Absolutely. So I'm currently working with a venture-backed tech company that focuses on creating software solutions. And one of their roles that they need is they need appraisers.
Mm.
Essentially, they need real estate appraisers to come work their program. And they real estate experience isn't required. Um, so essentially, there is kind of a training program already that they have in place, but I want to basically make it VA compliant.
Hmm.
Um, so essentially, this company doesn't have any veterans right now, but we created an on the job training program in which veterans are now applying to it. And so once we get the business registered with the VA, then the veterans that every veteran that comes in through the program will be able to utilize that benefit.
That's
Um,
great. I mean, wow, that's great because it's like you're almost creating in companies a veteran hiring machine. Like you're
yeah,
not like you're making it easy for them to hire veterans and to be able to pay for their training. That's really incredible.
that's the goal. Yeah, thank
Mm,
you. I'm
mm,
glad that because a lot of times it's hard to explain. So
hmm. It's no, it makes a ton of sense. So what does your day-to-day life look like? Like what's walk us through, especially for those listeners who aspire to start their own company.
typically I wake up between 5:30 and 6:30. I go to the gym, and after the gym, I basically start my day around 7. And I either do like homework assignments or answer emails between 7 and 8, and I start to get ready for
Mm,
class around 8:30.
mm,
And so I go to class the class. It differs. So I have class from 9 to 1 some days, or 9 a.m. to 8 p.m.
mm.
So in between those little gaps, I call candidates and interview them, or I go to meetings to pitch clients and things like that. So it varies, but it's fun.
That's awesome. I mean, that's my hat's off to you for being able to do both of those
Appreciate it.
simultaneously. Any thoughts on that for people who are thinking of like pursuing a degree while also running and starting a company?
I would just say, time blocks. They work. Just like when we were in the military, you have your PT time. Keep that as your PT time if you can. Even lunch times, like as long as you can keep your your schedule, you'll be good to go. I think
Hmm,
it's always a challenge.
yeah, that's great advice. I second that. It's a habit I still struggle with, but it's so true. If like you can maintain that discipline, if you can have that structure, because there's so especially if you're starting your own company or off roading, you're creating something out of nothing. So to at least have some daily structure creates some sanity in your life. Um,
Right.
and is most of your work at this point reaching out to employers and kind of explaining this, or is it a 50-50 split between finding the companies and finding the military veterans?
So once the role opens up, it's easy to get veterans to apply,
Yep.
and then at that point, I'm basically vetting the veterans to see, uh, hey, what's your intent? When do you want to apply to this job? How many GI months of GI Bill do you have left, and things like that. So yeah, it's pretty much that's kind of how it is.
That's great. What other advice do you have for people who are trying to find, maybe they've been out of the military for a couple of years, or maybe they're on active duty? Any advice for them about how to find whatever career may make them happy?
Um, I guess I'll be a little cliche here and say self-discovery is important. I noticed that you said that, put that on your website,
Mm-hmm.
but I think that's critical. But also, if there's anybody that you see in your day-to-day life that hey, you think maybe you want to live the life that they live or do what they do, um, try your best to have a conversation with them, because that one conversation could lead to a plethora of opportunities for you, especially if you're having those conversations before you get out. I think it's easy for us to think, you know either tech or finance. I think that's pretty much where everybody goes. Like it's either tech, finance, school, or maybe like mom's couch or something like that. A little bit of a mix. And I think it's important to at least figure out what you want. And, I always say, and this is a little bit morbid, but this is kind of how I live my life for the sake of my obituary, right? Like at the end of the day, I don't want to leave anything on the table. And so like, whether it's working on Wall Street or going to an Ivy League school, figure out what those must-haves are, and then just start like making a roadmap for the next and the next and the next step.
I love that. That obituary mindset is a good one to kind of just distill down. There's so much noise and nonsense. Like what really matters at the end of the day. Right. And you're focused right now currently on New York. Is that right?
Pretty much, yeah.
Do you have plans in the future to expand to other geographies?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely in all of the metropolitan cities.
Yep.
I think that's where we can find the most impact in what Banneret does. So, DC, San Francisco, Atlanta, all of those places, we're coming.
That's great. That's great. And then what sort of industries? I know the example you gave was a tech company. What industries do you see people working with?
Tech industry and the hospitality industry, I think. I think that's where the military veteran skill sets can be directly applied, especially from an operational standpoint, where we're always mission driven. And I think those two industries definitely, lend to like the military veteran lifestyle.
That's great. And then do you have a sense for the functional roles? I'm guessing it's like you said, operations and maybe like sales, or like what type of functional roles do you see people doing?
So I would think operations, sales, software engineers. I think software engineers is a huge one that I've been seeing.
That's great. And I guess it could really expand to anything too, right? Any skill set that a company needs, like I think you had said like I'm not sure if it was an actuary or what it was for that one software company, but it's like, you could, whatever skill set a company needs, they can use this to train the veteran to do that role.
Exactly. And that's the goal.
That's awesome. Well, what else would you want? Anything else you'd want listeners to know about the work that you're doing or how to take advantage of the GI Bill?
I would say you can email me at robert@banneret.org if you have any questions. Also, we have a podcast called the Knight's Tale podcast, where veterans, similar to this, where veterans share their stories about how they were able to have a successful transition out of the military. And also, we're having a second season of that podcast right now. So, that's about it.
Awesome. And for listeners, in the show notes at beyondtheuniform.org for Robert's episode, you'll find links to Banneret. I'll put his email address there in a way that hopefully those pesky bots won't find and start sending him spam emails. And I'll also put a link to his podcast, Knight's Tale, which I think has almost 40 episodes right now and growing in this next season.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, Robert, I appreciate Frank connecting us. And really excited that the work that you're doing is great, and it's rare to find these businesses where it's a win-win. Like everyone is winning. You're winning, the company's winning, the veterans winning, and then the society's winning by having companies that are staffed by more veterans who are doing good work. So that's pretty exciting.
Thanks. I appreciate that. Thanks for your support.
Surface.
Well, thank you so much for listening and for supporting Beyond the Uniform. Beyond the Uniform is produced and edited by me, Justin Nassiri. Our staff is entirely part-time. They do this on nights and weekends out of the goodness of their hearts to give back to the military community. Our director of outreach is Steve Bain, who relentlessly books guests, finds sponsors, puts together our newsletter, and thousands of other critical tasks every single week, all behind the scenes to keep Beyond the Uniform running smoothly. Our editor is Kathleen Dillon, who listens to and transcribes transcribes every single episode to help out those who don't have the time to listen to the show. It has a major impact on our site's SEO value, which helps people find us through Google. Our data analytics and insights advisor is Andrew Woolridge, who pores over the data each and every month to help us better understand how to best serve the Beyond the Uniform audience. Our digital production work is done by Michael Cummings, who puts together custom artwork for every episode. If you're enjoying Beyond the Uniform, the best way to help us out is by telling your friends and fellow service members and veterans. iTunes reviews, believe it or not, have a big impact on getting the word out as well. So if you have a chance to leave a positive review, that is greatly appreciated. If you know of a business that would like to get their product or service in front of a military audience, we are always on the lookout for sponsors, which helps us subsidize the cost of putting this show together. And if you haven't yet signed up for our newsletter, you can do so at beyondtheuniform.io. We send out a newsletter twice a month, and it is a treasure trove of helpful information for your civilian career and transition. And be sure to check out our coaching program, where you can be connected with a subsidized, professional, certified executive and career coach to help you in your career decision making. Thank you for listening, and I'll be back next week with more stories from military veterans about their civilian career. Take care.